Do you have a volunteer for homeroom mom or dad today?
I'll do it again with Elisa, Marsha.
Thank you.
You're
The Lord
welcome.
loves a volunteer. It's in the Bible. Blessed are the volunteers. It's isn't it in the Song of Deborah? I think it is. Anyway, we're gonna
do it. I don't know how to do what you're asking.
Oh, all I really do is I click on you and I make you a co-host with me. And that way, if somebody has a hot mic or something crazy is happening on video, because we have had something crazy happen on video before. I won't tell you what it was, just in case you didn't see it. But sometimes people forget their videos on. And if there's people walking through your house doing things that maybe shouldn't be seen by everybody, or maybe you're doing something that shouldn't be seen by everybody, and you think your video is off, and maybe it's not. But that's what the co-host does. They can mute a hot microphone. You would get the access to that. Or if you saw a video that was looking a little sketchy, I always get a little freaky when people head toward the bedroom or the bathroom. In fact, you'll see my eyes get really big. If you see somebody headed to the bathroom or the bedroom, it gives you the opportunity to turn their video off, not take them out of the class, just turn the video off where we can't see what they're doing at that moment, even though it might be perfectly legit. You know, we want to keep the classroom, even though it's virtual. Have had accidents before, haven't we? If you didn't see it, don't worry about it, okay? Don't ask. If it wasn't you and you don't know it, then let me protect your, you know, oh no. All right, so we did make Marcia the co-host. Okay, wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to share the screen. Not going to review too much from last night, because last night was a review, and that's pretty much what I decided, is that in order to incorporate the new information that has popped up over the last two Shabbats in our Shabbat, not Shabbat, in our Sunday Torah study, in order to be able to incorporate that, I needed to reteach it from last week. So that's what we're going to do. We're kind of reteaching the same lessons, but we're incorporating new information, not really new, it's in the Torah, but new paradigms, new patterns that we're seeing in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and how it relates to the angels visiting Abraham first, Abraham and Sarah. The message is delivered to Abraham and Sarah, and then we're told why, that he's not going to do the destruction that he's going to do without first notifying Abraham. And he gave the reason why, because Abraham is going to teach his children after him the way of righteousness. And that's an important detail as we start working into the Shema, the instructions in the greatest commandment, and how we're looking at the hours of Messiah as well as the night watches of Messiah. Because like I said last night, I don't know how we got such a misconception of Yeshua as only grace, when he is, in terms of pretty much hellfire and damnation prophecies, he's right up there with them. Even his parables, you know, there's lots of woes, and not just whoa, but like, whoa, this is not something good, whoa. So we want to pay attention to that. We don't want to discount that. We don't want to only see Yeshua as grace and completely ignore the warnings that he's giving us. Because like, well, I didn't go far enough. Matthew 24, that's something we've been working with, you know, flee to the mountains. What does it mean to flee to the mountain? Well, last night we saw flee to the mountains meant go to Abraham. Go back to the mountain, because Abraham is associated with Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is associated with the mountain of the Torah, Mount Sinai. In fact, the rabbis say that at the giving of the Torah, Mount Moriah in Jerusalem actually lifted up and descended down on Mount Sinai like a blanket. You know, we've been talking about time travel and space travel. That would have been something to see. But we thought Lot would rather do almost anything other than go back into the fire than go to the mountain. He asked if he could go to Zoar, one of the 5 cities, and of course the angel let him go. And there's people out there like that. They would rather do just about, they want God on their terms. Lot was righteous compared to the Sodomites. And some people are good with that. That's kind of the lukewarm idea. I want this name relationship with Yeshua, but I, you know, the obedience stops when I don't want to obey. And with Lot, that's kind of the situation we got into. Anything but entering into that covenant. So anyway, this was kind of what we've been working with at the back of our minds. Why will the days be cut short? For the sake of the elect. How will the days be cut short? For the sake of the elect. I don't know if we're going to come up with what I would say is a firm answer, but I think we're going to come up with lots of ideas, right? And so we looked at 1 Corinthians 3:11 as an example of Lot. Where Abraham and Sarah, they're in the mountain, they're safe. In fact, they're about to have fruit. A year later at Pesach, Isaac's going to be born. Right, so good things are happening. He will teach his children after him. They have an inheritance. They have a resurrection in the land. But the angels continue on the journey, and there's somebody else who will not have a resurrection in the land, at least the way that Abraham and Sarah are. And that's going to be Lot and his 2 daughters. And so the day, right, this is going to be the day of judgment. It's going to show it because it says it'll be revealed with fire, and it will test the quality of each one's work. If what he has built on it remains, he'll receive a reward. And this is what was told to Abraham. Fear not, Abraham. I am your shield. I am your very great reward. There will be a reward of resurrection for you. There will be a reward of inheritance to your children, to you. And he said, if anyone's work is burned up, and that's exactly what happened to Lot, his flocks, his herds, his home, his money, part of his family, burned up. He suffered loss. But like the angel told him, save life. Don't worry about what's back there. You know, quit trying to hang on to stuff. Go forward, just save your life. And apparently, there's going to be people like that. They're going to be so attached to the things of life that it's like it says here, he himself will be saved, yet only so as through fire. There's not going to be much reward because their fingers were too clingy to earthly possessions. Okay, so let's get on into the hours and just review that for any new people. If you're new, and you haven't heard me say this before, I can't see you at this point because I've got the screen maximized. But if you have a question before I cut the recording off, feel free to type it in the chat box, and there's probably somebody in the class who can answer that for you. And if not, I'll see it once I turn the recording off. So some of this, it might seem overwhelming. You might say, where are you getting this? We can go back in the playlist on your YouTube playlist, and you can find this full lesson, by the way, which is the hours of Messiah. At any rate, just to review for our memory, remember the hours of the temple day, they're not gauged by minutes. The dog just fell up. They're not 60-minute hours. It's simply a measurement from sun up to sundown divided by 12. So those segments of time are called hours, even though they are not 60 minutes. I mean, there might be a time of year when it would work out to be exactly 60 minutes, but, you know, days lengthen, they shorten. that kind of throws another monkey wrench into the shortening the days idea. But at any rate, depending on the time of year, we just have to make generalizations. Okay, so we're just using these hours as generalizations of sun up to sundown, right? And then they're further divided. Okay, the rabbis take those 12 hours and they divide them into 4 segments. Now the night hours will be divided into 3 segments. If you take the 4 and the 3, you end up with 7 segments of measured time, with the evening and the morning. Kind of a perfection idea there. But within those hours, these 4 segments of time, from approximately 6 a.m. or sunrise to approximately 9 a.m., the idea is that this is the time when the Holy One is looking into the Torah. Right? If we put this in the context of Yeshua's last day, right? And we're also going to go back and maybe look at some things that happened the night before. Well, we did that last night as it pertains to the reaping of the barley, that it had to be after sundown that it occurred. And there were so many things in threes that night leading up to the sunrise on the day that he was crucified. So they say from the first to the third hours of the day, approximately 6 to 9 a.m., the Holy One is looking into the Torah. He's looking into the measurement by which he analyzes his creation, by which he measures his creation. So during this segment of time, Yeshua, we know, was crucified to the tree. Right? So there is a contemplation period during this time. Now, we know that from 9 a.m. to noon-ish, remember we're going ish with these times, depending on the time of year, which would be the 3rd to the 6th hour day. Your first hour is going to be the first hour of sunlight, right? Or your first segment of sunlight. So crucifixion between the 1st and the 3rd hours. And then from the 3rd to the 6th hour, we know that this was the segment when darkness covered the earth. This is the time, or the one of the 4 segments, that time in which Adonai is thought to sit on the throne of judgment. He sits on the throne of judgment from the 3rd to the 6th hours. This is when there's darkness. Then from about noon until about 3 p.m., he moves. They say he descends from the throne of judgment and then he ascends to the throne of mercy. And we talked about this in the context of the Feast of Trumpets. You know, when we hear the teruah, what's happening? Well, he's descending from the throne of judgment and then ascending to the throne of mercy with a shout. And that's when the elect would be gathered into the cloud. And so this is going to fall from the 6th to the 9th hours. And I just ran across a little detail that might help. So I put it there in italics. It said that Israel was redeemed from Egypt at the 6th hour of the day. You know, they have the Passover night where the firstborn are killed. There's going to be sunrise. When did they actually start going out, physically walking out of Egypt, what is considered the actual redemption, because they're moving? It's thought that they were redeemed at the 6th hour, or about noon. Right? When did the death angel go through? About midnight. And I found that in Tosefta Pesachim 10. All right, so it's going to be a commentary on Seder Pesachim. And then at about 3 p.m., which would be the conclusion of the throne of mercy, what does Yeshua say? It is finished, right? And then he gives up the ghost. He goes into the grave. And then some things are going to happen. He's going to preach to the spirits in prison. This is kind of descending into the time of day after this, into that fourth segment of the day, which we would call the cool of the evening, when it looks like the day is closing down faster. It really isn't, but our perception is that the sun is setting faster. And in that fourth segment of the day, the rabbis say that since the destruction of the temple, Adonai instructs his children in the fourth segment. And that's really the description of what is going on in the Garden of Eden. I say, well, what's happening to those souls under the altar? If they're in Abraham's bosom, we know they have a consciousness. Their body has not been resurrected, but they do have a consciousness. And they are given robes while they wait that allow them to function in the Garden of Eden without a body. And they say that what's occurring is instruction, teaching and instruction. And they say this is what happens in that particular time of the day. So in terms of what happens on Yeshua's crucifixion day, it really does align with these four segments of the day that are spread over the 12 hours, more or less, hours, okay? So the idea here is to start kind of shaking your brain up a little bit and saying, well, you know what? In scripture, an hour is not always 60 minutes. An hour is not always going to fit neatly into a 24-hour day. It might be more, it might be less. I need to start thinking of it also as a segment of time or a significance of time. It's expanding your definition of an hour. All right. And so if you understand the hours, that the first hour is going to begin with sun up, and then that last hour is going to conclude at sundown. And then you see how these four segments of the day are also divided up in terms of spiritual activity in the heavenlies. And you can see that Yeshua's schedule of activity on that particular day did align with that. He did go teach the spirits in prison after he gave up the ghost. Right. So our interest is in the Omer offering because it aligns again with what we've been looking at in terms of Gideon, his story of battle. First, a spiritual battle with the Baals, with the idols that his family had come to worship, that Israel had come to worship. And then once he, puts the idols on notice, then he begins to put the physical enemy, the Midianites, the Amalekites, he puts them on notice. I'm coming. And of course, with 300, that couldn't have been too intimidating. But remember, the enemy has a dream. He has a vision of a kikar of barley bread rolling into the Midianite camp. And when it says a kikar, if you want to look that up in Hebrew, a kikar is round. And it can refer to something round like a barley bread, or it can refer to a district. Like the plain of the Jordan is the kikar. It's a round district. Why round? I'm not sure. But if you look at the geography, the topography of Israel, what you realize as you drive through Israel is that probably from very ancient times, cities were built up on hills, or towns were built up on hills. And then the fields that they worked kind of encircled that hill. So this may have been where the idea of a kikar emerged. They look, if you look at fields from an airplane, it looks more like a checkerboard. You see more rectangular configuration. But in Israel, at least in ancient times, the configuration would have been more in the circles, the hill, the town, the city, that being that place of safety where people would go at night. You didn't really stay out in the fields at night unless you were on a watch. Anyway, the barley bread is a kikar. It rolls into the Midianite camp. It upends the tent of the enemy. And that was a prophecy, basically, that Gideon was going to have a victory over Midian and Amalek. So Israel is going to have a type of resurrection, spiritual resurrection from idol worship. And of course, toward the end of Gideon's judgeship, we know that they backslid again. What does it have to do with Lot? Well, again, Lot's story here with Sodom and Gomorrah, it's set at the time of Pesach. He makes matzah for the angels. And the angel tells Lot to flee. It says in English, usually the plain of the Jordan. If you read it in Hebrew, it should say the kikar. He's telling Lot, flee the kikar of the Jordan, the district of the Jordan. What's significant about that district? Well, in ancient times, obviously it wasn't the sea of salt and the field, the desert of salt that you see today. It was like the garden of the Lord. Lot is leaving a place that looks like the garden of the Lord. It doesn't, you go there today and you're thinking, well, I wouldn't have been so upset about leaving this place. It didn't look like that. It was the most beautiful place. And now he's being told to leave it. And you can see why he's lingering. He's thinking, how could all this wonderful landscaping, the fields, the trees, and all these wonderful things. I mean, yes, they have found petrified oak trees up in the caves there above the Dead Sea. It was a lush, beautiful place. And so it's where the Jordan empties into the Dead Sea today. And so that plain, or the kikar of the Jordan, is just north of the Dead Sea today. How did it look before the destruction? We don't know exactly, but we know that in ancient times there was a huge lake there, not a Dead Sea type lake where it killed everything, but a beautiful floodplain, right, full of fresh water. At any rate, later, we want to look at the spot. Why the kikar? Well, later, as Joshua is leading them into their inheritance that was promised to their father Abraham, where do they cross? They cross the Jordan. So Lot is told, you need to get away from here. This is going to be destruction to you. What is going to be a land of promise and beauty and a garden to the Israelites is going to be fire and destruction and barrenness to Lot. You see the contrast here with the kikar. So it keeps leading us back. It keeps linking us with the barley, with the Pesach, with the district of the Jordan here, which is where you must cross over to officially be in the land of Israel. I mean, you can fly into Tel Aviv, but spiritually, when we go back to Israel, we will cross the Jordan. We will cross the Yarden because it's a resurrection river. It goes back again to the Luz bone in Bethel, the resurrection bone, and how the Jordan is pretty much the spirit, starts up here in the north, and it flows through the land. And then the terminus there is the Dead Sea, which one day will no longer be dead. And so it represents, again, resurrection. That desert's going to bloom. But it's telling us where to look in terms of, well, how can the days be shortened? If the feast days begin with Pesach, and even before that, if maybe they begin with the reaping of the barley the day prior to Erev Pesach, then definitely we want to start in the month of Nisan, and we want to look at the spring feast to try to figure out what's going on. And so going back to Menachot, which describes to us the process of designating the barley. Remember, when it's still in the field, when it's still attached to the ground, that's significant. When it's still attached to the ground, it's selected and it's set apart. It says both on Shabbat and during the week, the Omer offering would come from 3 seah of reaped barley. I just want to remind you what we read last week about the city of Beitar, about the baskets of 3 seah and how they fell for a false Messiah. Right? We're not leaving that idea behind. It's still very much a part of where we're going. It says both on Shabbat during the week, it was reaped by 3 people with 3 baskets and 3 sickles. The mitzvah of the Omer, the first fruits of the barley, is to bring barley reaped for the meal offering from fields proximate to Jerusalem. They need to be close to Jerusalem. If the barley did not ripen in the fields proximate to Jerusalem, one brings it from any place in Eretz Yisrael. But where is the first choice? It needs to be close to the temple for a reason. Right now, we've got 3 people reaping 3 sheaves of barley. And, that repetition, yes, yes, yes. And then reap. Hurry up and reap, basically. If we're going back to our flagship story here with Abraham, Sarah, and Lot, we know 3 angels visited Abraham and Sarah. We have the angel who delivers the promise of Isaac to them at the appointed time, but it doesn't look like he continued on to Sodom with the other 2, unless, like we said last night, there does appear to be a point in the dialogue with Lot and the angels that he's not really addressing them as Adonai, that he seems to be talking or appealing directly to the Holy One, the same way that Abraham did at some point. He appears to be treating one of these 3 angels or men as if he were the Holy One himself. So it's one of those little hints that we take away from the text. In other words, though, the angels are there to perform one task at a time. And I think that's going to help us understand why are there 7 angels. There's actually more than 7 angels in Revelation. But in those waves of 7, we see 7 angels. We see that each of the 7 assemblies have 7 angels. Why? Because the angel of Ephesus is not that concerned with what's going on with Philadelphia. They each have a task and they mind their own business for the most part. Right now, that can be overridden because, of course, they're created beings. Their orders can change. In fact, that's going to be a function of Messiah, as he will be able to make the angels of the 4 winds work together instead of being concerned with their own thing. Right? Only one being able to prevail at a time, which that can produce chaos. But if all 4 are also doing their own thing without regard to some sort of peace in the earth, without trying to destroy the earth, there are some checks and balances in place, because we can see that the angels of the 4 winds are being told to hold back what you're doing, stop what you're doing until the righteous are sealed. Okay, they have to be sealed in their hands and their foreheads, and we're going to look at why there. But typically, an angel will perform a unique task, but they can team up, and 2 things can be accomplished simultaneously. For example, at this time of Pesach, we've got these 2 angels who went on to Sodom. One is there to rescue Lot's family from fire. The other is there to destroy Sodom and the other 4 cities with fire. They're working together, but they each have a task. So they can be done simultaneously, but typically angels will do one thing. And that's why I think you're seeing in Revelation, there's so many angels doing so many different things, because that's the way they're wired. That's the way that they're created. And where we were reading in Revelation 14 last week, you could see those different angels. And one of those angels was the angel of fire, right? It says the angel with power over fire. Well, the angel with power over fire, it might be that exact same angel that went to destroy Sodom with fire. Okay, that's just where two things line up. That doesn't hurt to let one of them explain the other one, right? They'll explain each other. So the idea here, whether we're talking about the barley harvest being closest to Jerusalem, this is going to be the idea in Revelation, that those closest to Jerusalem can probably expect judgment first, right? The first fruits on the angel's journey is going to be to deliver the good news to Abraham and Sarah. You're going to have offspring. And Abraham obviously lives closest to Jerusalem on this journey. So they're going to look for it closest to Jerusalem, closest to the temple. And this concept in Hebrew is called Ein Ma'avirin al HaMitzvot, which I think I misspelled on the transliteration. Ein Ma'avirin al HaMitzvot, not mitzvot. Okay. And you can translate that out to, we do not pass over a mitzvah. That means that you perform a mitzvah, a commandment, as quickly as possible. If you know to do it, if it's not in question, you do it as quickly as possible. We can get bogged down in should I, shouldn't I, when we get into the technicalities, but in a plain, straightforward commandment, you do it as quickly as possible. You don't let the opportunity pass, because we know what happens. Stuff always happens if we procrastinate, if we delay. And some of us are wired like that. You might have somebody in your life who never does today what they can put off till tomorrow. And in terms of a commandment, we have to change. We don't ask the Holy One to change. We have to change. And so because of this principle, rather than traveling the land looking for some good barley, if you can find qualified barley close to Jerusalem, that's where you collect it for. Because some commandments are time bound. If you don't do it within a particular time frame, then you can't, there's not do-overs. You just, there is a reward for performing mitzvot, and that reward is not your salvation, by the way, right? They were saved before they went to the mountain. You're like, Lot, he was saved, but apparently he never went to the mountain, right? So there is a level, there is an element of salvation that we can engage in, but we lose all rewards. We leave everything behind on the day of judgment because we invested so much in physical, natural things that we failed to acquire any spiritual rewards, for the world to come. And so that's why we don't want to be distracted, because we're letting an opportunity pass. And that's where I think a lot of Christians misunderstand Judaism. They think that in Judaism, that somehow if you do a lot of commandments, you're going to be saved. No, it has more to do with the judgment being weighed in those scales in terms of reward. Salvation is a different issue. Salvation is the beginning. And he's able to make us stand. But we don't want to delay in doing a mitzvah. Now, they say in atypical circumstances, they might go farther to find the barley. But in a normal year, they would look very close to the temple because they wanted to be fast with their obedience. They wanted to hurry the performance of the mitzvah. And part of this is if you get it close to the temple, when you reap it and you begin to process it, their goal was for it to be very green and to still be moist. They didn't want it to dry out from the journey. because remember, the barley is going to represent us. And we want to be, what does it say? You'll be in your old age full of sap and very green, like a tree. Well, the same way with the barley. They want that barley to be nice and green and moist. They want it to be alive when it arrives, not dead. And it reminds us again of Ha'azinu, the Song of Moses. We're told that when Moses died, his moisture had not diminished, because the moisture indicates how we have absorbed the word. So it's like dew on thirsty vegetation. He says, let this song fall like rain on thirsty grass, like dew on the vegetation, so that it will keep you moist. The word will keep you moist, so that when the time of harvest comes, you'll be a living sacrifice. You'll arrive at the temple and you'll still be green and moist. So that Torah portion of the Song of Moses, by the way, is Ha'azinu, give ear. And so he is seeking hearers of the mitzvot for first fruits. So just kind of think about the story of Beitar. Remember, it was the last stronghold of Bar Kokhba, the false Messiah. And this marked the end of the Jewish rebellion against Rome, the last beast kingdom, and the beginning of that final exile that they're still in. Even though many have gone back to the land of Israel, you still have almost as many out as in. Right. And so I can't imagine why, if I had the opportunity to have citizenship there in the land and to influence the land in a positive way, why I wouldn't. But, you know, the angels will deal with them and the angels will deal with us, right? And, but remember, in that history of Beitar, there were the 3 sayas in the basket. The response by the witnesses to the barley is going to be yes, 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 to the 3 reapers. So you've got 3 sayas that are required for the Omer of first fruits. If you compare that, those who fell for the false Messiah were represented in this history by 3 sayas reaped by Rome, the red beast. And they say this was for Beitar's iniquity and following a false Messiah. And that's the context of what Yeshua talks about, that, you know, there's going to be false messiahs. Be careful. You don't want to get reaped in that harvest, right? It's a contronym. There's going to be first fruits that are green and moist, and there's going to be those who are reaped because they felt for a false Messiah. Those baskets, you bring them in the baskets. It symbolizes people. And remember, these baskets in the story, they held the Tephillin of Beitar. Like somehow the Romans went around and collected all the Tephillin in the city. And that was part of the history that we read. And so it's showing us something specific here. When you collect the Tephillin, and it talks about them in a measure of 3, like these 3 sayas for the Omer of first fruits, then it takes us back to what we learned about the Tephillin and what they represent. How the 2 sides of the Tephillin, one has the regular 3-pronged shin, representing El Shaddai, and the letter of the commandment. But on the other side, you have a 4-pronged shin, which represents the spirit of the commandments. So you can only get 7, you can only get the menorah when you put the word of the commandment with the backlight of the Torah spirit. You put those 2 together, and then you actually have Torah, right? Without the spirit, it's dead. You put the spirit with it, it's alive. And so the Tephillin are going to remind us. I mean, the historian is dropping all sorts of clues if you know scripture. So he's saying these people missed out. They had the Tephillin, but it turned out they functioned in them like the mark of the beast on the hand and on the forehead, because they did not have the spiritual discernment to know that this was a false Messiah. All right, and just visually, so you can see this, Yeshua said, this is the greatest commandment, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed Ve'ahavta, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. But there's a whole passage there. And in that passage, we are urged, to put them on our head and to put them on our arm or our hand. The way that they strap these on, they go all the way from the bicep down to the fingers. So every mention of this in scripture, they're covering it. And again, kind of going back to the more than a door lesson that we did, why don't you literally write the commandments on the doorpost? Because weather, use, so forth, would eventually efface the words. And the risk there is that you would efface Yod He Vav He, you would efface the name itself, which we're commanded not to do, or you would somehow efface some of the letters, and you might actually read the commandment that tells you to do something as not to do it, or not to do something as to do it. So you have to protect the word itself with some vessel, like the mezuzah on the door, in terms of writing the commandments on your forehead and on your hand, instead of literally writing it on your skin where it's going to rub off, or parts of it could rub off and then it would read wrong. It could garble the sacred name. Instead, you write them on parchments and then you put them in the box, and then you wear the box on your forehead or on your arm. Okay, but this picture here is showing you the regular sheen on one side here, stands for El Shaddai, also stands for fire, Esh. And it's also the structure of Jerusalem, the three valleys of Jerusalem. If you look at it from above, the sheen is literally stamped onto the city itself. So here's the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4-9. Shema Yisrael, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God. Remember, knowing is cherishing. It can be an equivalent expression, depending on its use, to that knowing of Abraham, like I have cherished him, I have loved him, right? So he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words, which I am commanding you today, shall be on your heart. You shall repeat them diligently to your sons or your children. Okay, that's an important phrase. You shall repeat them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. When you lie down and when you get up. This is why we want to look at the night watches, right? Because when you lie down can also signify when you die. Sleep can be symbolic of death. So if you put these words in your mouth every night when you lie down, and then these words are on your lips every day when you get up, you are actively preparing, if it is with mindfulness, if it is with love, with all your soul, with all your strength. If the words are coming out of your heart, then this is preparation for your death and your resurrection. He says, you shall also tie them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets on your forehead. You shall also write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So there's a similarity between the mezuzah and the Tephillin. And we had that lesson on the mezuzah. What does it represent? The beasts of the field are outside the door, but the family inside the door is having covenant meals at their table. They're celebrating Shabbat at their table. So this is similar. When you put on the Tephillin, It's linked with when you lie down and when you get up. Right? So that collection of the Tephillin at Beitar, the Jews at that point in history had fallen for a false Messiah. And so what do they collect? They collect the children. If you'll remember, part of the history was they put the children in a scroll. They wrapped them up in their own Torah scrolls that they were studying from and burned them. So the fruit that was promised to Abraham and Sarah, a child, burned up. The promise that was going to be passed on through the child, he will teach his children after him. Teach them what? The commandments. He will teach them this righteousness. Well, that's represented by the Tephillin. They're collected in baskets, as if, look, this is a false Messiah. Did the Romans know this? Probably not. Is this a completely true history? I doubt it. I think it's highly symbolic. Whoever was writing it was asking you to make this connection. If you know the scriptures, you can make this connection. If you don't know them, then it doesn't, you sound like it's just, well, that's history, but it sounds like there's a lot of exaggeration here. It's kind of strange musings on what actually happened, because as it migrates from the Mishnah into the Talmud, they up the numbers from 3s to 4s. And actually there's 4 compartments inside a Tephillin. So that's why it's telling me this is probably more of a symbolic history, a teaching history, than trying to be a true account of history. Like, well, we can't even say the news tries to do a true account anymore, but there probably was a time where people did try to record things accurately. So that should sound to us very much like this. Remember, Pesach is where we're looking for our clues. Exodus 13:7. Unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and nothing with yeast shall be seen among you, nor shall any dough with yeast be seen among you in all your borders. And you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall serve as a sign to you on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a powerful hand, the Lord brought you out of Egypt. Therefore, you shall keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year. All right, a powerful hand. It makes me think of Yeshua saying, you're going to see the Son of Man coming in power. Right? So he's associating himself here with this salvation, with redemption, and so forth. But there's the parallel here. In the same way that you were supposed to teach your children, part of the great commandment is to teach your children. Just like he pointed in that proto-prophecy about Abraham. The first you heard of that is when he says, well, look, I'm not going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah before I tell Abraham, because he's going to teach his children. This child hasn't even been born yet, but he's going to pass this on to his son. So in view of that, I'm going to go ahead and tell him what I'm about to do. Right? So as you go to the Passover, this is a continuation of that. When you keep the Passover, it's part of this great commandment. Tell your children on that day, on particular days, there is meaning. And then you have to personalize it. This is what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. It has to be personal in every generation, or you're not going to be telling the story right. If it's something that happened long ago and far away, you didn't tell the story right. You have to tell the story as if you came out of Egypt. And when you tell it that way, it shall serve as a sign to you on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, to the end that the Torah is going to be in your mouth. Right? Because if that Torah is in your mouth, if that great commandment is in your mouth, then most likely you are going to be prepared should these 3 angels visit again. Right? Because they visited at the season of Pesach. And you say, well, I thought we're going to be resurrected at the Feast of Trumpets. I think we will. I also think we're being warned right here so specifically. I mean, you can't mistake this language. It's too precise. It's too exact. That if you waited until the Feast of Trumpets to prepare yourself, you may have waited too late. Like Lot, you might be escaping with just your life. But see here, for the righteous, for the children of Abraham, see, Lot was a relative of Abraham, but he was not a child. Not because he couldn't have been, but because he chose not to be. He didn't want to go to the mountain. He'd rather go anywhere but there. So you're identifying yourself as a child of Abraham, that this is going to be, this Torah is going to be in your mouth. And so with a powerful hand, he's going to bring you out of Egypt. And you have to do it at the appointed time from year to year. So the sign and the seal of Pesach is like this preliminary separation, just like choosing the sheaves of barley. While they're still in the ground, while they're still attached, they tie a cord around them and say, this bundle here, yes. With this sickle, yes. In this basket, yes. Reap, reap. It's just like that. And once it starts, it happens very fast. And so he's priming us by using Passover and saying something significant will happen at Passover. And then from there, you are going to journey to the mountain. You are going to journey to Shavuot. And this obedience, he says, it's going to apply specifically to Pesach. It can be a high Sabbath. And then it's going to continue. Once you start this journey, you don't want to depart from it. Lot apparently got the Pesach. He got the unleavened bread. But rather than going to the mountain next, which is what you do, you go to Shavuot, he decided instead to detour to Tzoar. Maybe the 5th worst city in the world, instead of the 1st worst. 1st worst? 5th worst? I don't know. Liver worst. At any rate, here's what Amos says. Amos 8:4. Hear this, you who trample the needy to do away with the humble of the land, saying, when will the new moon be over so that we may sell grain? And the Sabbath, that we may open the wheat market, to make the bushel smaller and the shekel bigger. So he's even associating it here with Shavuot, the wheat. Because remember, the principle is you don't begin to consume the product until the bikurim is offered. So you didn't eat the barley until the bikurim offering had been offered in the temple. You didn't want to eat the wheat. They extended the principle. You didn't want to eat the wheat of the new crop until the bikurim was offered, until the 2 loaves were offered. So there's a connection here. It says to make the bushel smaller, the shekel bigger, and to cheat with dishonest scales, so as to buy the helpless for money and the needy for a pair of sandals, that we may sell the refuse of the wheat. Again, it's, you're kind of, he's connecting this disgust with Shabbat with our greed. If we go back to the story of Lot, they say the reason the angels had to tell him to go, save life, because Lot was looking back at what he was leaving behind. They said, you have to leave this whole plain. You can't go out and try to find your flocks and your herds. Wherever your shepherds have your flocks and your herds, don't go look for them. Don't go back into the city. Don't go back to your house. Don't go try to find your in-laws. Don't go try to get your money. Everything that you're leaving behind, you're leaving it behind because that's where you invest it. you didn't want to go to the mountain, right? And this is what Sodom was known for. I don't know if you haven't seen the lesson that Rabbi Krieger did a few years back on what was understood about Sodom from the rabbinic sources. It was insane, some of the laws that they had in order to take advantage of the stranger or the poor person. Can't remember the title. Maybe one of you remembers, and you can type it in the chat box if you remember what it was. But at any rate, when we see that black horse riding out in Revelation and he's holding the scales, he's going to be holding honest scales. And it won't be a matter of, did we technically keep the Shabbat? It's going to be a matter of what was our attitude toward it? When will this be over so I can get back to business? Right? And then as Amos goes on, he's connecting this to love. Kind of goes back to, stop it, leave him alone, leave him alone. In Deuteronomy 5:10, he says, showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. And this is what Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. He didn't say just keep my commandments. He says love and keep. This is the knowing. Like Abraham, he loved and he kept, and therefore he was known and he was kept on that day of trouble. In fact, not only was he kept and protected, he prospered and received reward for his faith because he had been engaging these tests and he never lost his faith. And so your attitude towards Shabbat, is it just an interruption to what I want to do? To my buying and my selling? Because that's the mark of the beast. People invent all sorts of stuff, computer chips and all this, that this is the mark of the beast, or you're going to get a tattoo on your forehead or something. Seriously, put it back in the context that Nehemiah put it. Don't make up new context for it. It was in the context of people bringing goods into Jerusalem to buy and sell on Shabbat. Your attitude towards Shabbat is the place we can go to find out whether you do have the mark of the beast or not. Because if you look at this particular Tephillin on the other side here, you have the 4-pronged sheen. This is the love of the commandments. This is the spirit of the commandments, not just the written word. You could tick off the box and hate Shabbat. You could consider it an interruption. You could say, I don't care if it is Shabbat. I'm going to go about my commercial business as if it's any other day. They only have this big sale once a year. I'm not going to miss this big sale just because it's Shabbat. Okay, that's the exact type of attitude that's going to tell him about the rest of your life. Who has actually imprinted upon you? Has the spirit of the Torah also imprinted upon you with the written letter of the Torah? Or have you just engaged the written part with no spirit at all? Or this is crazy, well, I have the spirit, but I don't have to do what it says. I don't have to follow the written part. See, these things, they're kind of setting you apart all by yourself. It's sometimes what you don't do, not what you do, right? So the barley is, I took this is cited in several sources that you can see down there at the bottom of the slide. So it's cited a lot. At any rate, barley is generally considered to be a grain fit for livestock, as opposed to wheat, which is considered fit for humans. Thus, commentaries explain that we aren't just counting the days from the Exodus until the day we were given the Torah. Rather, these are meant to be days of refinement, distancing ourselves from the beast. Thus, we are commanded to start counting and refining ourselves from when the offering consisting of the barley was brought. It starts a clock, right? We think of refinement and repentance and so forth in the fall feast. He's saying, yeah, but don't forget what I taught you back in the spring with the barley. From the time that the barley was reaped, you need to have a much heightened consciousness of where you are relative to the feast, relative to the great commandment, you shall love, right? Because from the onset of the spiritual journey, it says we are coarse and similar to an animal. But by the end of our spiritual journey, we have refined ourselves and we are ready to bring an offering consisting of wheat, the food staple of mankind. Well, here's the challenge. How are you going to bring the wheat if you never brought the barley? Right? How are you going to walk that spiritual journey if you were never even set aside as the first fruits of the barley? If you weren't green, if you weren't moist, if you weren't close to Jerusalem at that time, were you already dried up and dead by the time you made it there? Right? So let's just recap some things to set us up for the next session. Again, going back to the hurrying, right? How do we hurry the days? How does it become half a time? How are the days shortened? Well, we saw the field of barley was always selected so that the offering could be hurried in its performance, so nothing would come along to interfere. We have the process of reaping, where we get yes, yes, yes. And then when he says, shall I reap? Instead of saying yes, they say reap, which they interpret to indicate that he should begin immediately. Don't delay any longer. Hurry. Chametz, usually translated yeast, it's sour. Chamutzim in Hebrew is pickles. So a pickle is something that's gone sour, right? You let it pickle for a while. Well, you don't want to let your mitzvot pickle. Don't pickle them. You don't want pickled mitzvot. You don't leave a mitzvah undone. You hurry to do it. If you know to do it, then you hurry to do it. Because matzah and mitzvah, they're spelled the same. It's just how you vowel them. So what is that saying? Perform the commandment in a hurry. Don't let it get pickled. Don't let it go sour. And by the same token, don't let your heart become sour to the commandment. Don't let it sour how you perform it, like Amos was saying. You're sitting there just counting the minutes till Shabbat is over. That's chametz in your Shabbat. And then we see how Abraham was known because he would teach his children after him. In the same way, if we take it back to Pesach, the children of Israel, he says, I will know you. Because if at this appointed time every year, you will personally engage the Passover telling and live those commandments before your children, as the greatest commandment instructs you to pass them on, he's saying you're going to be living as though Abraham still lives. You're going to be living as though Yeshua still lives. That's the whole idea. This is what happened to me. It's your testimony. How Yeshua brought you out of Egypt. He brought you to salvation. And if you believe that Yeshua brought you to salvation at Pesach, then you have to eat it in a hurry. And then you had to leave Egypt in a hurry. Hurry, hurry. Right? So these are clues. Where are we going with this? We're still seeking an answer to how will the days be shortened? Well, if he hurries the time, that means that at least with Passover, we can begin this Passover cycle with the idea that don't let me delay to do what I know to do. Don't let me sour a commandment in my heart. I want to hurry. I want to look forward to Passover because I'm going to eat it in a hurry. There's a sense of urgency. And then, how are you going to leave Egypt? You're also going to leave Egypt in a hurry. You're prepared to go somewhere. Is this the lifting up into the clouds? I don't know. But I suspect there is a preliminary step that is engaged, it's activated at Passover. There is a selection process the day before as the sheaves are identified. This is going to be later than the Passover in Egypt. That's going to be an addition once they're in the land. But for the Passover itself, we need to have this sense of urgency. We need to have this sense of something could happen to me this year at this appointed time. And I know we already do that. When we eat the Passover, we always know, we're always expecting, part of that's, the Elijah thing. You go open the door to see if Elijah's there. But one year he will be. We can't let it turn into a Santa Claus and cookies tale. That's not what it is. It's real. And so that as we approach Passover here very quickly, we want to hurry to engage this particular feast and not kind of overlook it and say, well, I don't think Yeshua is coming back until the Feast of Trumpets. So we'll just, tell stories and have fun here. Telling stories is part of it. But in this case, a story isn't a lie. It's the truth. And some year, because you're preparing your children like Abraham did, some year, something's going to happen. And it's going to be so plain. And you'll look back and you'll say, all those years, I just couldn't get a handle on this. I knew there was something eluding me. But it's because it was practice. But because you have practiced, you are going to be able to move into that cloud and be able to move with that cloud wherever it goes between Passover and Sukkot. Okay, so next week, we might take a quick glance back at Revelation 14. So you may want to go back there and look again. Now that I've added this extra information, the sickle chapter where we've got basically Yeshua going out to reap his own, to get his barley harvest, right? But then we have the angel of fire who comes out. And there's going to be an angel with a sharp sickle. And we can kind of see the difference between children of Abraham and then the children of Sodom. Where does Lot fit in there? Well, in a sense, he was reaped. He just didn't have the same destination. He didn't have the same reward, right? He didn't go to the mountain. And so, maybe these intermediates, maybe these are the ones that have to wait for the second resurrection. I don't know. I can't say that definitively. I just know I don't want to be in that category. I don't want to risk that. There's no reason to risk it if you love Yeshua. If you love Yeshua, he's made it very easy. He just says, obey me. Love me. He wants the same thing we do. We want to be loved. We want to be cherished. We want to be respected. That's all he's asking from us. Because if you love him, if you respect him, then you'll do your best to keep his commandments. And you'll be available if there is a Lot in your family. And the angel says, go to the mountain. Go back to Aunt Teresa, right? Go talk to her. She knows what's going on. She'll get you straightened out. You'll have to hurry, but go, right? Go to Uncle Jason. It's scary right now, but go to Uncle Jason. Uncle Jason will explain this to you. You'll have to learn fast. You'll have to move fast. but go to the mountain. And they will explain to you how this is going to work. But first, you're going to have to turn loose of Sodom. And I think a lot of people would have made that decision. Lot is one example who said, I would not turn loose of Sodom. Sodom's always going to be with me, so I'll just take the least worst, the least bad, the least of the 5 cities of Sodom. Hopefully we've put enough word in our loved ones, our family, our friends, that on that day when the angel says, go to the mountain, they'll say, okay, what's the fastest road? Look out, I'm about to get a speeding ticket, right?